The Lord be with you, and a warm welcome to you from all of us at Powerscourt with Kilbride. You can see I'm basking in sunshine at the moment, and if you listen carefully, there are sounds of countryside. And the reason why I haven't said from all of us here at Powerscourt with Kilbride is because I am at the moment in the magnificent setting of Curracloe for the Ballyvaloo retreat, or I should say at the Ballyvaloo Retreat Centre. And we are here with several students. In fact, there are over 12 of them who are coming forward and putting themselves forward for ordination. So I just want to show you the view that I'm looking at the moment. With the most magnificent scenery to share this with, we open in prayer. In many ways, it's a wake-up call for myself and for many others. When we enter the company of those with fire in their bellies for the Lord, those people of differing ages who have felt His call and who have given themselves to asking advice, to starting training, to be considered in a whole multitude of different ways, to see if they are fit for ordination. I wanted to think a little bit about their courage today, and also to consider the control that we can put on different things in our lives. What's very clear through all of those who step forward and those we have met so far is their utter trust in God. They're at a stage in their spiritual development where He has asked them to do a very large thing in their lives, for some of them something unique and completely different to what they've been doing. And they need to have the courage to trust Him and to give things over to Him. And it's astounding how much trust they have. And it's really, as I say, it's holy ground. They are teaching us so much in how they speak about the Lord at this stage in their development and in their journey with Him. What an amazing time we all had as interview panels for the Bishop's Selection Conference that took place from Monday to Thursday of this week. It was absolutely faith-affirming, uplifting and inspirational to sit with all of these 13 candidates that came forward because they had distinctly felt God's call in their lives. Some had run a mile and been drawn back again. Others noted that they had really known this in their heart all their lives. Such a variety of different vocations, and yet for the one God, the same calling in each one of them. It was an absolute blessing and a privilege to be with them. Why am I telling you this? Well, it's really important for you to know it. It's really important for you to know that people still come into our church. They are still drawn and love the Church of Ireland. It's also important for me to ask you to pray for them. It's a private process. You don't need their names, but just ask God to embolden them, to surround them, to guide them, and to continue to open them up as He really is doing, to follow Him and to serve Him in a multitude of different ways within His church. Most recently, a very good friend of mine sent me a recommendation for a book on Audible, or indeed hard copy I'm sure is available too. And it's a book called Anxious for Nothing by a man called Max Lucado, I think, or Lucado perhaps. If you look it up online, you'll find it. And I started to listen to this on the way to the conference, and I wanted to talk a little bit today about control because it's very fresh in my mind, having been with all of these students who have relinquished control into God's hands in trust that He will guide them in the right pathway. Max Lucado gives an example of what can happen a person with regard to anxiety. And he uses two examples actually, those who were in the trenches for the world wars and those who were in the skies. And without quoting figures and all that, because I'm doing all this off the top of my head today, he talks about those in the trenches, when they came back, those who survived, suffered from what could only be described as emotional inertia. And what had happened to them was that they had absolutely no control of their surroundings, of their circumstances. Not at all. They were in a hole in the ground. And their anxiety levels got to such a height that the body closed down and they became numb. And that's what's called emotional inertia. On the other hand, in the skies, those who were flying, the mortality rate, relatively speaking, was higher. But they didn't suffer from the same thing, because those who survived came back knowing that 90% of the time their survival depended on their skill. They had their hands on the stick. And how they flew that day, I know circumstances around them also can dictate, but how they flew on any given day was to a large extent in their hands. And so they had some control. Max takes this a little further, and he says, when it comes to anxiety, we have to be honest first and foremost and say that really we're not in control at all. We can make all our plans, and sometimes, most times, please God, these plans come into fruition. But if we're to be really honest, the only control we have relies on the next breath we take. So what he recommends that we do, Shashi, blithely, is hand this into God's hands. I know for a fact that there is somebody watching this online service today who has something that they are holding on to. And for some reason, because it happens to me all the time myself, there is something inside them that stops them from handing it entirely to God. We can say the words all we like. God, I give this to you now. I really give this to you. But in your heart space, is that happening? It relies on us launching ourselves in faith that we will be caught and we will be held and we will be guided. And that is a really difficult thing to do. The scripture is filled with promises of God's loyalty, love, guidance, protection. Just look at the book of the prophet Isaiah, particularly the second part of the book. And the New Testament, Jesus takes up the mantle. Why are you worrying about what you'll wear or what you'll eat? Just look at the created order around you. Look at the way it actually supports itself at God's hand. This Patrick's weekend, we celebrate a remarkable person who had the trust and the faith to place all things into God's hand. And it wasn't an easy road for him. He was put through absolute misery at times in his life, but he held fast. And it made me think that perhaps placing things in God's hands and trusting him and faith doesn't necessarily feel as we expect it to. We don't necessarily feel that great sense of relief, great sense of confidence, because we are human beings. So maybe our prayer today is, like Patrick, and like everybody else, my goodness, in Scripture and out of Scripture, those who have followed God's path through hardship and everything else, and through joy, it must be said too. Maybe they just kept going. I always say that courage is what you do next. You could fall apart one day, and the next day just get up again and start again with God. Maybe that's what it takes. Relinquishing control into God's hands may not feel like a safe thing to do. It mightn't even feel like a wise or a good thing to do. But all you need to do, because of God's grace, is simply say the words, God, I give this problem, or I give this situation, or I give this person, or I give this part of myself into your hands. And I ask you for the most benevolent outcome to this issue or situation or way of being. And mark my words, and I say this with good authority, be vigilant and watch, and you will see that the doors will open, and there will come a time, maybe in the evening time, maybe in the evening time next month, maybe even next year, you will be afforded the opportunity by heaven to have a look back and suddenly say to yourself, wow, I see what you did there, and thank you.